a WikiVidi documentaries production. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy. Rif Dimashq Offensive, February to April 2018. The Rif Dimashq Offensive, codenamed Operation Damascus Steel, is a military offensive launched by the Syrian Arab Army in February 2018 in a bid to capture the rebel-held Eastern Ghouta suburb. East Ghouta, a pocket of towns and farms, has been under government siege since 2013, and has been a major rebel stronghold in the vicinity of the capital of Damascus. According to the United Nations, nearly 400,000 people live in East Ghouta. The Associated Press reported that the potential capture of the whole rebel-held Eastern Ghouta enclave would represent one of the most significant victories for Syrian President Bashar al-Assad in the civil war and the worst setback for the rebels since their defeat in the Battle of Aleppo in late 2016. Similarly, Reuters stated the capture of Eastern Ghouta would represent the biggest prize for President al-Assad since the recapture of all of Aleppo. During the offensive, one of the heaviest bombardments of the war took place, with more than 1,600 people being killed by air and artillery strikes. Background: with most of the suburbs of Damascus recaptured by the Syrian government by February 2018, there remained a significant swathe of the countryside near the capital city captured by jihadists from the rebels in 2012 that had been under siege by pro-government forces since 2013. Syrian forces began bombarding and shelling the area in early February after Russian-brokered peace talks failed, killing 200 by the 8th of February, according to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. They again started bombarding it on the 18th of February, and did so for 8 consecutive days before beginning the ground offensive. The main rebel faction in the area was Jaish al-Islam, based in Douma. The second largest was Falak al-Rahman, an official affiliate of the Free Syrian Army, controlling much of central and western parts of Ghouta, including the Joba and Ain Terma districts. In addition, Arar al-Sham and Tahrir al-Sham had a far smaller presence. Initial bombardment. On the evening of the 18th of February 2018, heavy artillery and airstrikes began targeting the rebel-held East Ghouta enclave. The Syrian Air Force launched large-scale air raids over the region, with warplanes reportedly striking rebel defensive positions, hospitals, and residential areas in and around the district towns of Douma, Hamariyah, Sakba, and Mesraba. Accompanying artillery shelling and rocket strikes pounded rebel territory. Overall, 260 rocket and airstrikes were conducted during the day. By the following day, the strikes had reportedly killed 94 civilians. Concurrently, government troops prepared for a ground assault, establishing positions on both the western and eastern axis of the pocket. Early rebel mortar attacks on central Damascus killed 1 civilian. Around midnight between 19 and 20 February, the Russian Air Force joined the offensive as well, targeting several rebel-held districts. On the 22nd of February, the SAR dropped leaflets over Ghouta, calling on residents to leave the area and urging opposition fighters to hand themselves over. Meanwhile, a total of 16 civilians were killed, and about 128 were wounded in retaliatory rebel rocket attacks on Damascus between the 18th and the 20th of February. On the 24th of February, despite the adopted resolution by the United Nations Security Council on a 30-day ceasefire in Syria, it was reported that airstrikes continued after the vote. Ground assault. At around 8:30 a.m. on the morning of the 25th of February, hours after the UNSC called for a 30-day truce, a ground assault began, with SAR forces capturing multiple points around the Bashar Air Defense Battalion on the southeastern front of the pocket while approaching Hazrama and Tal Farzat. Shortly afterwards, it was reported that the army captured the town of al-Nashbiyah, the villages of Hazrama and al-Salihiyah, and the hilltop of Tal Farzat from Jaish al-Islam fighters continuing the advance towards Horsh Zarakia. However, pro-government sources later reported al-Nashbiyah and Hazrama had not been captured, but instead partially surrounded. At around 10 a.m., an assault on a new axis commenced with SAR units attacking the rebels on the Haris to Arbin front in the northwestern part of the pocket. The Army's 4th Division reportedly also pushed into the rebel-held al-Ajami district of Harista, capturing some buildings in the area. Meanwhile, It was initially reported that the heavily fortified village of Hosh-Da'ara was also captured in the east of the pocket. However, it was later confirmed that the assaulting government troops were ambushed by the rebels, with up to 15 soldiers killed and a tank captured. The village remained under rebel control. Among the army's weapons used to level entire swathes of rebel trenches and fire support positions in the assault was the UR-77 mine-clearing system. The same day as the ground operation started, a video surfaced of the Syrian Army's Brigadier General Suhail al-Hassan speaking to government troops in Damascus, while being guarded by Russian and Syrian soldiers. During his speech, al-Hassan said, "Damascus awaits you, to dress her in victory. With God, we will be victorious, and, with faith, we will be victorious. Remember that each one of you decided to fight to defend the truth, dignity, and to save Syria and its people." Jaish al-Islam claimed to have killed 70 pro-government fighters and captured 14 on the first day of the ground offensive. In contrast, the UK-based pro-opposition activist group Syrian Observatory for Human Rights reported 13 soldiers and 6 rebels were killed, while 2 soldiers were captured. Syrian army advances continued on the 26th of February, with the reported capture of a large part of the Harris orchards, including an elaborate tunnel complex. The advances were reported to be notable. The next day at 9 a.m., a humanitarian corridor was opened for 5 hours. However, according to the Russian Ministry of Defense, it was shelled by rebel groups in order to prevent civilians from leaving the area. Early on the 28th of February, following a nighttime operation, the army captured Hosh-Da'ara. During the fighting for Hosh-Da'ara, government forces utilized a mobile bridge to cross a moat near Sifco laboratories and seize rebel trenches. The military also made attempts to advance towards the town of al-Shifaniyah, where they made limited gains during the day. It was later reported that government troops managed to enter al-Shifaniyah. The next day, the Syrian army captured Bashar Air Defense Base, southwest of Hosh-Da'ara. After the third round of nighttime assaults, government forces captured the village of Horsh al-Zarqiya on the 2nd of March, after which the military started shelling the nearby town of Utaya. Later in the day, the Battalion 274 base, south of al-Shifaniyah, was also captured. Meanwhile, the rebels launched a counter-attack within Harasta, which went on for hours, resulting in numerous casualties on both sides. The next day, government forces took control of Utaya, al-Nashbiyah, and Hazrama, as well as most of al-Shifaniyah. The military also attacked the town of Al-Rain in the northeastern part of the Ghouta pocket, but was repelled. The advances took place following heavy fighting throughout the day for Utaya, with the army eventually seizing the town. Pro-government sources reported that the rebel defense of Utaya was fanatical, and the most violent of the clashes took place in the town's northern outskirts. Following the capture of Utaya, the rebel defense of al-Nashbiyah and Hazrama quickly collapsed, leaving the two towns fully surrounded. But within 1 hour, the military captured al-Nashbiyah and Hazrama without resistance after it became clear the rebels had retreated from the towns in the final hours of fighting for Utaya so to avoid being besieged. Hours later, it was reported that the army was on the verge of also completely taking control of al-Shifaniyah. At this point, Michael Stevens of the London-based think tank Royal United Services Institute told The National that the fall of the rebel-held Eastern Ghouta pocket was inevitable. In the evening, the military reportedly reached 2 new rebel-held towns, while the rebel supply line along the Doma al-Shifaniyah road came within their artillery range. During their advances over the previous several days, the military had broke through a 12-kilometer defensive belt linking al-Nashbiyah with Rayan called the Trench of Death. On the 4th of March, the rebels managed to recapture large parts of al-Shifaniyah in a counterattack. Meanwhile, the military captured the town of Beit Neem in the south of the pocket. Following the advances over the previous 2 days, the army started operations to split the Eastern Ghouta pocket in two, with 3 kilometers remaining for this to be accomplished. Meanwhile, a spokesman for Jaish al-Islam claimed via Twitter that rebels had killed 150 soldiers since the previous night. Contrary to this, the source reported 12 soldiers had been killed. Several hours after the capture of Beit Neem, the military had taken full control of al-Shifa. By 5th of March 35% of the Eastern Ghouta pocket was taken by the Syrian military, which was 2 kilometers southeast of rebel-held Doma. The 4th Armored Division reportedly captured several farms to the northwest and came within 1 kilometer of cutting the Harris to Doma road. Meanwhile, government forces were also reported to have made advances in the south of the pocket. Early on the 6th of March, most of Al-Rayyan, in the northeast of the pocket, was reportedly captured after the army advanced north of al-Shifa. In the afternoon, pro-government sources also reported the capture of al-Muhammadiyah in the south of the pocket. The same day, Russia offered the rebels and their families safe passage out of Eastern Ghouta. The rebels rejected the offer as psychological warfare, and stated their defense lines had been re-established after crumbling in the first days of the offensive. Farms around Mesraba, Beit Sawa, and Horsh al-Ashari had been captured by the army by the end of the day. Splitting the pocket. On the 7th of March, the military captured Beit Sawa and Horsh al-Ashari, clearing the way for an attack on nearby rebel-held Mesraba. Later, Mesraba was being struck by preparatory fire before a planned infantry assault. By nightfall, pro-government forces had practically cut the Eastern Ghouta pocket in two with artillery fire. At this point, government troops advancing from the east were between 1 and 1.3 kilometers from reaching the army's Harris vehicle base on the pocket's western edge. In response to the recent SAR gains, the rebels reported they were deploying more guerrilla-style ambushes in lost territory in an attempt to stop further advances. On the 8th of March, the military captured the town of Horsh Quaybat, as well as the Aftras Air Defense Battalion base near the rebel-held town of Aftras. On the 10th of March, after 24 hours of fighting, the army seized Mesraba, as well as the Kilani gas station on the main highway, thus splitting the Eastern Ghouta rebel enclave into 3 sections. The 3 separated pockets were Harista, Doma and the southern part of Eastern Ghouta. The rebels denied Eastern Ghouta had been entirely split, but source stated the roads between the 3 parts were indeed cut due to artillery fire. Government shelling during the day reportedly focused on underground shelters and even mosques, many of which were being used as hiding spots for civilians. Government forces also advanced towards the Harris vehicle base, although they failed to capture Madyara, the last town separating them from the base. The next day, the rebels continued to put up fierce resistance to prevent the linking up of government troops with the vehicle base. Nevertheless, the SAR eventually captured Madyara, thus officially physically splitting Eastern Ghouta in 2 and reaching the Harris vehicle base. On the 12th of March, government forces were 200 to 300 meters from physically cutting off Harris from Doma. Later in the day, the military finished encircling Harris, cutting it off from Doma. The army had also captured the town of Aftras, thus fully clearing the rural areas of the southern part of Eastern Ghouta. The battle for the town lasted several days due to heavy rebel defenses which consisted of a wide anti-tank ditch and several well-fortified layers of trenches and tactical positions in and around it. Government forces also shelled rebel positions on the Jobar axis during the day. Meanwhile, tensions erupted in the rebel-held town of Kafar Batna, with the rebels shooting at civilian protesters who were demanding an evacuation deal with the government. One protester was killed, according to a local doctor. Rebel territory in Eastern Ghouta was now officially reduced to 3 pockets, one in the north around Doma held by Jaish al-Islam, a second in the south around Hamaria held by Faylak al-Rahman, and a third in the west around Harista held by Arar al-Sham. Brought to you by WikiVidi documentaries. Would you like to know more?